Is The Ritual Killer a killer movie or a movie that should just be sacrificed? Let's talk about it now. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch Your Pass. Today I'm here to talk to you about The Ritual Killer, which comes to theaters and on demand on March 10th, 2023. It is a crime thriller where a driven cop has to hunt down a serial killer that seems to grow more powerful and elusive with each kill. My hot take is, look, I think you should pass on this. I liked the concept, I liked some of the things about it. But overall, it's just not really a good thriller or horror movie. There isn't a ton of suspense, there isn't a ton of kind of scares, and sometimes characters do things that with unclear motivations and that just seem to kind of come out of nowhere. So overall, I think you should pass on it, even though there were some things I liked. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and briefly talk about the ending. So if you don't want to know what happens in the film, I would turn this off at the ending section. I will keep it vague up until that point, and I will let you know when I get into spoilers so you can keep watching until I get there. But if you don't want to know what happens in the film, I would turn it off at the ending section. So in The Ritual Killer, you have a detective, Detective Boyd, who's played by Cole Hauser, who is pursuing this serial killer who seems to be targeting all sorts of people, but mostly children. He seems to be kidnapping children and then mutilating them, cutting off pieces that are never found, and is very elusive and is unable to be caught by pretty much anyone. There are cops pursuing him in America, there are cops pursuing him in Italy, and none of them can seem to track him down. So because of some of the clues that are found at the scene, Detective Boyd brings in the help of, I mean, Morgan Freeman, right? Like, if you're going to have anyone come help you, you definitely want Morgan Freeman to. He is a professor of African studies, Professor Mackles. He helps to kind of explain some of the things that this elusive killer is doing and helps to try to track him down before he can take his next victim. So things I liked about this movie. The first, I liked the practical effects. There were some decent practical effects. They used practical blood effects. They used practical makeup and body modifications and things like that. So I really liked that. I liked that they didn't try to do CG. I liked that they didn't kind of like hide it. There were some fairly gory scenes and they did a pretty good job. There wasn't a ton of like in the moment, but they set up these like kill scenes, these rituals for the ritual killer that looked pretty decent, especially for a small indie film. And also, they had some good practical makeup with the actual ritual killer himself, who was played by Vernon Davis. He had like ritual scars all over his body. I guess they're called keloid scars, and each of those represented one of his murders. And there were a lot of them because he was a serial killer and he'd been doing it for a while. And the team, the team behind the ritual killer gave him a good number of bumps throughout his body. So I thought that was a nice touch. I thought that was a good kind of like accent to his character. And so overall, I liked the practical effects in this film. Second thing I liked is the cast. Like, I liked Morgan Freeman. I love seeing Morgan Freeman. He doesn't have a huge role, but he has a bigger role than you expect from most like superstar actors that come into an indie film. And he actually gets involved in the overall detective work and some of the more action-oriented stuff. He doesn't go crazy, but he definitely has a more involved role than I expected when his name was on the poster. I also like Vernon Davis. I like that he like fully transformed for this character. I mentioned the body tattoos that he had. He also like changed his voice. He spoke in like a dialect, and he got to get some action in there. So I enjoyed seeing Vernon Davis as Randoku, and I also liked Brian Kurlander, the I don't know, financier in this film. He had a minor role, but he was kind of a fun like additional character to add that kind of like let this film go in various other directions. And I also really liked Giuseppe Zeno as the Italian detective in this film. He didn't have a big role, but I really enjoyed it. I wish that he had a larger part to play in this overall mystery. And also a nice cameo from Peter Stormare, although his was far too short for my liking. I wish he had been in it longer. So overall, I liked the cast. I liked the variety and the characters that they all play. Now, things I didn't love as much. The first, it's got a slow pace. Like I said in the hot take, it's not really a great thriller or crime film, and that is partly because of the slow pace. Some of that is the detective work that happens, but also there is not really much of a sense of urgency that happens. I don't know what it is about this film, but I never really felt that much kind of like tension in what was happening. Maybe because the killer seemed to be killing people left and right, so there wasn't really a race to stop him because everyone that he kidnapped was dead pretty quickly after. But it didn't really get to be an exciting film, and that led to a film that felt very, very slow. The second thing I did not love, and this is kind of related, there's not a lot of action or mystery. Like, you know who the killer is as they're exploring this character. You find out very quickly, like, things about him, and there aren't a ton of surprises. So there are some action scenes, although there aren't enough for my taste, and there isn't a ton of mystery in the overall story. So you are left with just kind of a journey that doesn't really have that many ups and downs. It's related to the slow pace, but part of that is that there is not a ton of action and there's not a ton of mystery in this thriller that is supposed to be a crime thriller. So you'd hope that it would have both of those. The third thing I didn't love as much is the writing and delivery. And this is not throughout. There's some decent writing, there's some decent delivery, but there are some not great writing, and that is kind of punctuated by some not good delivery, especially there's like a college scene where Morgan Freeman is teaching a class, and that is really rough. There's some lines later on that aren't great. There's some of the motivation for the main detective that didn't really come through for me. So I didn't really love that aspect of it, and that also contributed to the film not really grabbing me and keeping my attention. And the fourth thing I didn't love as much is there is some backstory that you have for the main detective that plays a pretty prominent role throughout, and I'll get into that in the ending, but it just didn't really hit for me. It kind of brought it up a couple times, but it never really crystallized. It never really gave me an emotional connection to the main detective, which I think was an important part of this film, having that emotional connection. And so because I didn't get that, again, the film didn't really put its hooks into me, put its ritual hooks into me. And the last thing I didn't love as much is there are some strange motivations in this film for some of the characters. And this is kind of towards the end. You don't, there are some plot twists that happen, especially at the end, that are just kind of like random. It seems like people make some pretty intense decisions at the drop of the hat. And that left me kind of scratching my head for some of the big things that happen at the end. So that is a great time for me to go into the ending section. If you don't want to know what happens in this film, I would turn this off now. The Ritual Killer comes to theaters and on demand on March 10th, 2023, so you can check it out if you want to. Again, my recommendation is that you pass on it, though. So going into the ending, the film has Detective Boyd trying to hunt down this killer Rengoku who is kidnapping people. Like, there's no type. He's kidnapping people, some kids, but he doesn't seem to have like a specific type, and just like mutilating them in these rituals. And you find out that he is a like African shaman, like a traditional African shaman or like traditional witch doctor, who is using these rituals, these body parts, to both kind of become more powerful himself, but he is actually employed by rich and powerful people who believe in this ritual magic that will like give them strength, give them like the abilities to then succeed in their personal life. So there is a certain like, I don't know, wealthy individual financier who hires him to kidnap a young child, because he will then use those parts to like further himself, be able to kind of like succeed in his business, be able to kind of like move around unseen and not have any punishments. And so he uses this shaman, this powerful like ritual person, to further his own business ends. And so to do that, the ritual killer has to kidnap individuals and mutilate them, which the detectives don't like. So they are trying to track him down. Now, there are two main detectives. There's Boyd in America, and then an Italian detective in Italy. They don't have a ton of interaction. The Italian detective comes in a couple times. Like I said, I wish he was in more. I liked his parts. I liked how, you know, his character was, but you didn't really get much from him. Most of the detective work is by Boyd. Now, in one of the scenes, in one of the ritual killings, they find this bag of like red tea, this like special pungent red tea. And so Boyd tries to figure out what it is. He can't figure it out. So he takes this to a renowned professor of African studies, Professor Mackles, played by Morgan Freeman. And he asks him to like help him figure out what this was. Now, when Morgan Freeman smells this tea, he seems like shook. I guess this is like a very special tea, a very kind of like specific tea. And so he seems to know more than he is letting on, but he kind of like refuses to help. But Detective Boyd is persistent. Detective Boyd, you know, wants to solve this case. And so eventually Professor Mackles decides to help Detective Boyd track down the ritual killer. Eventually that financier who hires Rengoku to kidnap a kid and like perform this ritual, the detectives are trying to like track him down, and for some reason Morgan Freeman says like, if he's going to want this ritual, it's going to be near water. And so they decide to look into companies that own buildings near water, and they find that there's an Italian company that owns a like warehouse near the water, which seems very specific. And also, if you're going to like pay someone to kidnap kids and kill them, you would hope that you would have like shell corporations and things like that to hide it. Apparently not, and so they are able to find the ritual site by this water, or in this warehouse by some water. Now, when they get there, you expect this to be a big action scene, a big like climactic scene, because there was a decent earlier action moment where Rengoku was like running from the cops and he had to like fight them off and whatnot. So you'd hope that this would be the big culmination, but unfortunately, it is not. When they get there, the financier guy is there, but he's hidden in the shadows. And so when the cops get there, he like knocks out Detective Boyd with a brick. But then Morgan Freeman or Professor Mackles then just like straight up slits that guy's throat, which was surprising, but also like anticlimactic because there was no actual big fight. It was like boom and then slash. Now, Rengoku approaches Professor Mackles and they have like a standoff. So Rengoku goes up to Professor Mackles and like grabs his throat and is like, I warned you, and is like starts choking him. But he didn't check Professor Mackles for anything. And so Mackles just like apparently has a knife that he slit the financier's throat with and just like stabs the ritual killer. And so that causes the ritual killer to feel pain and he like heals over. And then when this happens, like Mackles gets this like weird look in his eye. It looks like he's almost gonna like complete the ritual. Maybe he is starting to believe in some of this power, but he doesn't, and Rengoku then runs off. So after this, Rengoku has run off, and Mackles also seems to disappear. We see the crime scene. The Detective Boyd seems to be okay. The girl that was kidnapped seems to be okay. Everything seems to work out, and Detective Boyd gets a call from the Italian cop saying like Rengoku attended a lecture from Professor Mackles a while ago, and they met a few times after that. So it seems like maybe Mackles was working with Rengoku, or at least they were kind of like friends or something. And that is why when Rengoku saw him, he like said, I warned you, and like tried to choke him. But that was weird. But you know what? Professor Mackles is a professor of African studies, and Rengoku is a kind of traditional shaman or witch doctor or something along those lines. So I guess maybe it makes sense. So also after this, there's some like additional, I don't know, stuff that's in there for emotion that didn't really hit for me. The girl goes to the hospital and Detective Boyd goes to like meet with her or goes to like check in on her, and he gets there and her room is empty and he like starts like breaking down. He thinks that she's dead, but the doctor comes like, no, I just moved her to a different floor. And he's like, oh great, thank you, which this didn't really have the same kind of emotional effect I think it was supposed to. Now, Detective Boyd clearly wants to protect children. Earlier in the movie, he like straight up murdered a pedophile guy, which this scene I think was supposed to help establish his character, but it just did not hit for me. He basically like they arrest him, they barge into this guy's apartment. They're looking for this girl. She's in the bathroom. One of the his like detective partner goes and like gets the girl out of the bathroom. They leave, and then Detective Boyd just like the pedophile guy goes like, go to hell, and Detective Boyd's like, you first, and then just like caps him in the face, which I was fairly surprised by. You would think that he would arrest him and not just like murder him, but that was kind of one of the early formative scenes for Detective Boyd. He clearly cares about children, and then we find out a little bit more why after this scene when he kind of breaks down. We get to see his like flashback, the thing that happened to him that has been eating him up throughout this film. They have a few flashbacks to this scene, but you don't really get the full story of what happened. And what you find out is that his daughter apparently uh, was suffering from, I think, seizures, and so they were at a lake. She was sitting on a dock. He was, I guess, drinking, and he fell asleep slash passed out. He saw her on the dock and then passed out. And then when he woke up, she wasn't there, and he found out that she's in the water. She like went in the water and had a seizure and drowned. And so he is clearly broken up by this. But then to make matters worse, his wife is also just devastated by this. She blames him, probably rightfully so, for what happened. And so she says something like, she was the only thing that mattered in my life, like, and you took her from me. And then she runs upstairs in their house and you hear a gunshot. So Detective Boyd seems to have lost everything from this bad decision, from this moment. And it seems like that caused him to become extra protective of children. So we then see him go to like his daughter and wife's graves and give them flowers. So I guess maybe that is the like, it comes full circle. He has now saved a girl. She is okay. He was elated that she was fine and just moved to a different floor and that she will be okay. And so now maybe he can forgive himself for the thing that happened in his past. Maybe, I don't know. They don't really get much context from it, but he goes and gives flowers. Now, we move back to Italy, and the Italian cop gets some package, some strange package that was delivered to him. And then we also move to Detective Boyd, where he's coming home, and he also has a strange package. So they have similar packages. We only get to see what Detective Boyd has, but I assume they have similar items. Detective Boyd opens the package. It's like a burlap sack with like a string. He opens that up, and inside are 2 eyeballs and a note from, we assume, Professor Mackles saying, "I got him." So it seems like Professor Mackles hunted down the ritual killer, somehow murdered him, and then gave his eyes. You would think that Detective Boyd would be kind of like appalled by this, but then Detective Boyd takes the eyes and eats them. And again, this was a weird scene. There didn't really seem much motivation. I assume is coming full circle, and now Detective Boyd is doing the kind of ritual magic that the ritual killer was doing, eating the eyes to like become more powerful, be able to see clear. But it just felt very, very strange to have this be the end scene. He's eating the eyes, like staring at the camera, looking like angry, and then boom, that's the movie. So that is The Ritual Killer. Like I said, I think you should probably pass on it, but if you check it out, it's coming to theaters and on demand on March 10th, 2023. And thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.